When Kim Sung-ho saw a stranger holding his son's hand, his first instinct was fear. His second was fascination. The beautiful Burundian woman had done in 5 minutes what therapists couldn't do in months, to make his son smile. But by the time Sung-ho realized he was falling for her, she was already tangled in his dangerous world with no safe way out. The charity gala at the Denver Museum of Nature buzzed with aesthetics and pleasure. Sandra adjusted the pink silk dress she'd borrowed from her roommate, feeling completely out of place among Colorado's elite. She'd only come because her colleague insisted the museum needed volunteers for the children's corner, and Sandra never could say no to kids. That's when her gaze landed on him. A small boy, maybe 7 years old, stood rigid near the dessert table. His hands flapped rapidly at his sides, while adults swept past him like he was invisible. His eyes were fixed on the live string quartet, and even from across the room, Sandra could see the tears tracking down his cheeks. She didn't think, just moved. "Hey there," she said softly, crouching down to his level. "The music's pretty loud, isn't it?" The boy didn't look at her, but his flapping intensified. Up close, she noticed the expensive cut of his small suit, the way his dark hair was perfectly styled, the slight rocking motion he'd started. Sandra hummed quietly, a Burundian lullaby her grandmother used to sing. It was instinct, really. The boy's movements slowed, just a fraction. "My name's Sandra," she continued in that same gentle tone. "I'm from Burundi. That's in Africa. Very far from here. The music there is different. Softer drums, more space between the sounds." His rocking decreased. "Progress. Do you like dancing?" she asked, then amended quickly when he flinched. "Not the fast kind, the slow kind, the kind where you just sway, like trees in wind." The boy's dark eyes finally flickered toward her. Still not direct eye contact, but close. Sandra stood slowly, held out her hand, palm up. Didn't reach for him, didn't push. Just offered. "Would you like to try?" Just swaying. "You can stop whenever you want. We can stay right here by the desserts." For 10 long seconds, nothing happened. Then, with a movement so hesitant it made her heart squeeze, the boy placed his small hand in hers. His touch was feather-light, like he might bolt any second. So Sandra swayed. Barely moving, really. Just a gentle rocking motion, still humming that old lullaby. The boy moved with her, his breathing starting to even out. "You're doing great," she whispered. "Really great!" They swayed like that for maybe 2 minutes. To Sandra, it felt like the most important dance of her life. The boy's death grip on her hand gradually relaxed. His free hand stopped flapping, came to rest against his side. "Jae-min!" The voice came from behind her, deep and sharp enough to cut glass. Sandra turned, still holding the boy's hand, and found herself looking up at a man who made her forget how to breathe properly. Not because he was handsome, though he absolutely was, with sharp cheekbones and dark eyes that could probably stop traffic, but because of the fury radiating off him in waves. No, not fury. Fear. "Jae-min, come here," the man said in Korean, his tone softer now but still urgent. He was already moving toward them, and Sandra noticed 2 large men in dark suits closing in from different angles. The boy, Jae-min, pressed closer to Sandra's side. His hand tightened around hers. "I'm sorry," Sandra said quickly, straightening but not letting go since the child clearly didn't want her to. "He seemed upset. I was just trying to help." "Who are you?" The man's English was perfect, barely accented. His eyes raked over her, cataloging everything. "How do you know my son?" "I don't. He was crying, and I work with children. I volunteer at..." "Jae-min doesn't let strangers touch him." The man stopped a few feet away, and something complicated crossed his face. He never..." One of the suited men leaned in, whispered something in rapid Korean. The main man's jaw tightened. His eyes shifted from Sandra to his son, who was now humming the same lullaby Sandra had been singing, still swaying slightly. "What did you do?" the man asked, but his tone had changed entirely. The edge was gone, replaced by something that sounded almost like wonder. "Nothing, really," Sandra said, hyper-aware of the scene they were causing. Other guests were starting to stare. I asked him to dance, to sway with me, that's all." The man stared at her for a long moment. Then he did something that shocked her completely. He bowed, a quick, sharp movement from the waist. "Thank you. He's been having a difficult night." "Papa?" Jae-min said suddenly, his voice quiet but clear. "Nice lady. Smells like cinnamon." Despite everything, Sandra felt her lips twitch. That's probably my roommate's perfume. I borrowed it. The man's expression softened further when he looked at his son. A transformation so complete, it was startling. I see. Jae-mun, will you come with Papa now? We can go home. Can nice lady come? The words hung in the air like a bomb. The man looked genuinely stunned. One of the suited men coughed. Somewhere behind them, a woman gasped. That's not... The man stammered, actually stammered, and Sandra almost laughed because he looked so completely out of his depth. I can walk you both to your car, Sandra offered diplomatically. Make sure Jaemin feels okay with the transition. Then I'll head back inside. I promise I'm not trying to... Sung-ho! A new voice interrupted, feminine and sharp as a knife. What's going on here? The woman who appeared was stunning in that intimidating way some women were, all sharp edges and designer clothes that probably cost more than Sandra's car. Her eyes landed on Sandra with the warmth of a glacier. Hee-jin, the man, Sung-ho apparently, said with barely concealed irritation. This doesn't concern you. Your son is holding hands with a stranger at a public event, Hee-jin said coolly. I'd say it concerns anyone who cares about your family's reputation. Sandra felt Jaemin's hand tremble in hers. Without thinking, she squeezed gently, reassuring. I should go, she said quietly. No? Sung-ho said immediately. Then to Hee-jin, you need to leave, now. I'm just trying to help. You gave up the right to help 7 months ago when you walked out. His voice could have frozen fire. Security will escort you out if necessary. Hee-jin's perfect composure cracked, just for a second. Her eyes darted to Jaemin, something almost like regret flashing across her face before the mask slammed back down. This isn't over, Sung-ho. She left in a cloud of expensive perfume and barely contained rage. The tension in the air slowly dissipated. Sung-ho turned back to Sandra, and she was surprised to see exhaustion in his eyes. I apologize. That was inappropriate. Ex-wife? Sandra guessed. Something like that. He glanced down at Jaemin, who had started swaying again, still holding Sandra's hand. My son clearly trusts you, which is rare and precious. Could I possibly impose and ask you to help me get him to the car? He sometimes has difficulty with transitions. Sandra should have said no, should have made an excuse and disappeared back into the crowd. But Jaemin was humming her grandmother's lullaby. And something about this strange situation felt right in a way she couldn't explain. Okay, she agreed. Lead the way. The walk through the museum was surreal. Guests parted around them like water around stones, whispers following in their wake. Sung-ho moved with the kind of authority that suggested he was used to people getting out of his way. The suited men flanked them at a discreet distance. What do you do? Sung-ho asked as they walked. You said you volunteer? I'm a child psychologist, Sandra replied. Well, working toward it anyway. I'm finishing my doctorate at University of Denver. I volunteer at children's hospitals and community centers. Something shifted in his expression. From Burundi? Born there, yes. Moved here for university. She looked down at Jaemin. Your son is very perceptive. He has autism, Sung-ho said simply. High functioning, but he struggles with sensory input and social situations. Loud events like this are difficult. Then why bring him? The question came out sharper than she intended, but Sung-ho didn't seem offended. My father insisted. Family obligation. His tone suggested a lot of complicated history in those 2 words. They reached the entrance, where a sleek black car waited, looking exactly like the kind of vehicle very wealthy or very dangerous people drove. Possibly both, Sandra thought, with a flutter of unease. Jaemin, Sung-ho said gently. Time to let go of the nice lady now. Can you do that? The boy's hand tightened. Will I see her again? Sandra's heart squeezed. Before Sung-ho could answer, she crouched down again. Maybe, she said honestly. But right now, you need to go home and rest. That was very brave of you tonight, dancing with a stranger. You should be proud. Jaemin looked at her finally, direct eye contact for just a second. You'll come back? If your papa says it's okay, and if you want me to, I can try. Slowly, carefully, Jaemin released her hand. He walked to his father, who scooped him up with practiced ease. The boy buried his face in Sung-ho's neck, clearly exhausted from the evening's overstimulation. Thank you, Sung-ho said again. He shifted Jaemin slightly, somehow managed to pull out a business card one-handed. My personal number is on the back. If you're willing, I'd like to discuss. I'd appreciate your professional opinion on some things. Regarding Jaemin. Sandra took the card, saw an embossed name she couldn't quite read in the dim light. I'm not licensed yet. I don't need licensed. I need someone my son trusts. He hesitated. That's rare. Something in his voice made her look up. Their eyes met, held. For just a moment, Sandra felt like she was seeing past the expensive suit and the controlled exterior to something raw underneath. I'll call, she heard herself say. A small smile tugged at his lips, transforming his face completely. Good. He slid into the car with Jaemin, and they drove off into the Denver night. Sandra stood there on the museum steps, holding a business card, and wondering what exactly had just happened to her carefully organized life. Behind her, her colleague Rachel appeared, eyes wide. Please tell me you know who that was. A man with an autistic son who needed help? Sandra offered. Rachel laughed, the sound slightly hysterical. That was Kim Sung-ho. His family basically owns half the Korean businesses in Denver. Import, export, shipping. There are rumors. Well, let's just say they have connections that make people nervous. Connections? Like organized crime connections? Maybe. Nobody knows for sure. Rachel grabbed her arm. Sandra, you just held hands with the son of possibly the most dangerous man in Colorado. Sandra looked down at the business card in her hand, at the elegant script of Sung-ho's name. She should have been scared, should have thrown the card away and forgotten the whole evening. Instead, she tucked it carefully into her purse. 3 days later, she called. Sung-ho answered on the second ring. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't, Sandra admitted, pacing her small apartment. But I can't stop thinking about Jaemin. How is he? Better. He's been asking about you. A pause. He wants to know if you'll teach him more songs. Her heart melted a little. I could do that. Would you like to meet for coffee? We could discuss what Jaemin needs, what might help him. Another pause, longer this time. I'll pay your consulting rate, of course. I told you I'm not licensed. Then consider it payment for your time. His tone left no room for argument. Please, Jaemin needs someone who understands him. I need help. The vulnerability in those last words decided her. Okay, when? They met at a quiet cafe in Cherry Creek, one of those places where the coffee cost more than Sandra's textbooks, but the atmosphere was calm and uncrowded. Sung-ho was already there when she arrived, sitting in a corner booth with his back to the wall. Old habit, probably. He stood when he saw her, that same quick bow. Thank you for coming. Of course. She slid into the booth, accepting the coffee he'd already ordered. Where's Jaemin? With his grandmother, my mother. Something complicated crossed his face. She doesn't approve of me seeking outside help. Family matters should stay within family, according to her. But you're doing it anyway. Jaemin's happiness matters more than my mother's approval. He said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Tell me about yourself, your work with children. So Sandra did. She talked about her research, her volunteer work, her dream of opening a practice that focused on neurodivergent children from diverse cultural backgrounds. Sung-ho listened with an intensity that was almost unnerving, like he was cataloging every word. And your family? He asked eventually. Are they in Burundi still? Most of them, yes. My grandmother raised me after my parents passed. She stirred her coffee. She's the one who taught me that lullaby Jaemin liked. She used to say, music reaches places words can't. Wise woman. The wisest. Sandra smiled. She's probably having a fit right now that I'm not calling more often, but the time difference makes it hard. They talked for 2 hours. Somewhere in the conversation, it stopped being about Jaemin and became something else. Something that made Sandra's stomach flutter in a way that had nothing to do with caffeine. Sung-ho was funny, she discovered. Dry and subtle, but genuinely witty. He told her about Jaemin's obsession with trains, how he'd memorized every stop on Denver's light rail system before he turned 6. About how his son could draw detailed maps from memory, but struggled to tell someone his name when asked. He's remarkable, Sandra said softly. You must be very proud. Every day. Sung-ho's expression softened. Even when it's difficult. Especially then, probably. Can I ask about his mother? The shutters came down immediately. She left when Jaemin was diagnosed. Said she didn't sign up for a defective child? His voice was flat, emotionless, which somehow made it worse. Heejin prefers things to be perfect. Jaemin didn't fit that image. Sandra felt anger skim in her chest. That woman at the gala? Yes, she's been trying to reconcile. Claims she's changed. He smiled without humor. I don't believe in second chances when it comes to my son. Good. The word came out fierce. He deserves better. Sung-ho looked at her for a long moment. Yes, he said quietly. He does. When they finally left the cafe, the sun was setting over the mountains, painting Denver in shades of gold and amber. Sung-ho walked her to her car, his suited guards maintaining their discreet distance. Would you consider spending time with Jaemin? He asked. Not as therapy necessarily, just being there. You have a gift with him. Sandra knew she should say no, knew getting involved with this family, with their complications and their dangerous connections, was probably the worst decision she could make. Yes, she said instead. I'd like that. His smile was warm enough to make her forget the autumn chill. Saturday, I could pick you up. I'll meet you wherever you want. She wasn't ready for him to see her cramped apartment. Not yet. Just text me the address. Saturday came faster than Sandra expected. She showed up at the address Sung-ho had sent, which turned out to be a sprawling house in Cherry Hills Village, all modern lines and expensive landscaping. The kind of place that made her borrowed dress from the gala look like rags. Sung-ho answered the door himself, casual in jeans and a sweater that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Behind him, Sandra could see Jaemin bouncing on his toes, excited. Nice lady, the boy exclaimed, running forward before stopping short, remembering boundaries. You came. I promised I would, Sandra said, crouching down, and I always keep my promises. Will you teach me songs? Absolutely, as many as you want. They spent the afternoon in Sung-ho's living room, which was surprisingly warm despite its size. Sandra taught Jaemin Burundian children's songs, complete with hand motions. The boy absorbed everything like a sponge, his earlier anxiety at the gala completely absent here in his safe space. Sung-ho watched from the kitchen doorway, something tender in his expression that made Sandra's heart do complicated things. You're good with him, he said later, after Jaemin had gone upstairs for his afternoon rest time. He's more relaxed than I've seen him in months. He just needs patience, Sandra replied, and people who don't try to change him. Like you. It wasn't a question, but Sandra nodded anyway. They were standing close now, closer than strictly necessary. She could smell his cologne, something subtle and expensive. I should probably go, she said, not moving. Probably, Sung-ho agreed, not stepping back. The front door burst open with a bang that made them both jump apart. An older woman swept in like a storm, all sharp eyes and expensive handbook, followed by a younger man who looked like a masculine version of Sung-ho. Family, clearly. The woman's eyes landed on Sandra like lasers. She said something in rapid Korean that made Sung-ho's jaw tighten. English, Iyama, he said firmly. We have a guest. Yes, I can see that. The woman's English was heavily accented, but clear. Who is this girl? This is Dr. Sandra Umutoniwase, Sung-ho said, emphasizing the title, even though Sandra technically hadn't defended her dissertation yet. She's helping with Jaemin. We have doctors, who Jaemin hates. Sung-ho's voice was steel. Sandra is different. The younger man stepped forward, hand extended, and a charming smile on his face. I'm Sang-min, the better-looking brother. Ignore my mother. She's suspicious of everyone. I'm cautious, the woman corrected sharply. It keeps our family safe. Sandra shook Sang-min's hand, trying not to feel like she'd wandered into something way over her head. It's nice to meet you both. Why is a Burundian girl in my son's house? The mother asked, not even trying for subtlety. Iyama! Sung-ho's voice cracked like a whip. But Sandra was used to this. She'd faced it her whole life in America, the assumption that she didn't belong. She straightened her spine, met the woman's eyes directly. Because your grandson asked me to be here. And unlike everyone else, I don't see him as something that needs fixing. Silence fell like a hammer. Then, shockingly, Sung-ho's mother smiled. It was small, grudging, but real. Good answer. Perhaps you're not completely useless. High praise, Sang-min muttered. She usually waits at least 3 meetings before deciding someone isn't useless. The tension broken, the conversation shifted. But Sandra didn't miss the calculating look in the older woman's eyes, or the way she pulled Sung-ho aside before leaving, speaking in low, urgent Korean. "What was that about?" Sandra asked after they'd gone. Sung-ho hesitated. "My mother thinks I'm making a mistake letting an outsider get close to Jae-min. To the family." He met her eyes. "She's probably right." "Then why?" "Because Jae-min smiled more today than he has in 6 months." Sung-ho stepped closer. "Because you walked into our lives, and everything felt lighter. Because I can't remember the last time someone looked at my son like he was perfect exactly as he is." Sandra's breath caught. "Sung-ho! I know it's fast. I know it's crazy." He ran a hand through his hair. "But I need you to understand something. My family is complicated. My life is complicated. There are things about what I do, about who I am, that might scare you if you knew." "The rumors?" Sandra asked quietly. "About your business?" His expression shuddered. "What have you heard?" "Enough to know you're probably more than just an import-export businessman." She held his gaze. "But I also know you're a good father, that you dropped everything at that gala when you thought your son was in danger. That matters more to me than rumors." Something in his face cracked open. "You're either very brave or very foolish." "Maybe both," she admitted. "But I'm not scared of complicated." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of her braided hair behind her ear. Just that simple touch sent electricity down her spine. "I'm going to kiss your hand now," he said softly, formally. "If that's okay?" Sandra nodded, not trusting her voice. Sung-ho lifted her hand with reverent care, pressed his lips to her knuckles. The gesture was old-fashioned, gentle, and somehow more intimate than anything else could have been. "Thank you," he whispered against her skin, "for seeing us." When Sandra drove home that night, her hand still tingled where he'd kissed it. She had no idea what she was getting into, but for the first time in years, she felt truly alive. Her phone buzzed as she pulled into her apartment Kaiming lot. A text from Sung-ho. "Jae-min wants to know if you'll come back tomorrow. I want to know the same thing." She smiled, typed back, "Tomorrow, and the day after that." His response was immediate. "Good." That night, Sandra dreamed of music and dark eyes, and a small boy who hummed her grandmother's lullabies. She dreamed of belonging somewhere she never expected, with people who shouldn't make sense, but somehow did. She had no way of knowing that her simple act of kindness at a gala, asking an overwhelmed child to dance, had just changed the course of her entire life. No way of knowing that Hee-jin was already plotting revenge. No way of knowing that Sung-ho's mother was making phone calls, investigating this mysterious African woman who'd somehow infiltrated their family. No way of knowing that Sung-ho's father, the real head of the family business, was about to return to Denver after 5 years away, and he had very strong opinions about outsiders. But she would find out soon enough. Sandra spent the next 3 weeks in what she privately called the honeymoon phase of insanity. Every day, she found herself at the Kim house, teaching Jae-min new songs, helping with his homeschool lessons, just being present in a way that seemed to settle something restless in the boy. And every day, she fell a little harder for his father. Sung-ho was unlike anyone she'd ever met. He could be terrifying, she discovered. She'd seen him on the phone with business associates, his voice dropping to that dangerous register that made grown men stammer apologies. But with Jae-min, he transformed into someone soft and patient, willing to read the same train book 40 times in a row without complaint. With Sandra, he was something else entirely. Careful, attentive, present in a way that made her feel like the only person in the world. They were in his kitchen on a Tuesday afternoon, Jae-min napping upstairs, when Sung-ho taught her how to make kimchi jjigae. Well, attempted to teach her. Sandra had proven definitively that she couldn't cook to save her life. "No, like this," he said, laughing as he guided her hands on the knife. "You're murdering the tofu." "The tofu was already dead," Sandra protested, but she let him position her fingers correctly, hyper-aware of his chest pressed against her back. "I warned you I'm terrible at this." Terrible is an understatement. He was so close she could feel his breath on her neck. "How have you survived this long?" Ramen and sheer determination. His laugh rumbled through his chest into her back. "We're expanding your horizons then." "Is that what we're calling it?" She turned her head, found his face inches from hers. The laughter died in both their throats. "Sandra," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something." Before he could continue, his phone buzzed, then buzzed again. 3 more times in rapid succession. Sung-ho's expression darkened as he checked the screen. "What's wrong?" Sandra asked, stepping back to give him space. My father just landed at Denver International. He was already typing out responses. He's coming here, tonight. Your father? Kim Jin-seong. Sung-ho's voice was carefully neutral. He's been in Seoul for the past 5 years, managing operations there. If he's back, something's happened. Is that bad? That's complicated. He set the phone down, ran both hands through his hair. My father is traditional in ways that make my mother look progressive. He has very strong opinions about the family, about the business, about everything, and he's going to have strong opinions about you. Sandra's stomach dropped. Maybe I should go. No. Sung-ho caught her hand. No, I want you to meet him. I just need you to be prepared. He can be intense. Intense turned out to be a massive understatement. Kim Jin-seong arrived at exactly 7 p.m., flanked by enough security to invade a small country. He was an older, harder version of Sung-ho, all sharp edges and no softness. His eyes swept over Sandra with the warmth of an MRI machine. So, he said in English, his accent thicker than his wife's. This is the African woman. Sandra stood her ground, kept her voice level. My name is Sandra Umutoniwase. It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Kim. Is it? He circled her slowly, and Sandra felt like prey being evaluated by a predator. My wife tells me you've been spending time with my grandson, with my son. Yes, sir. Why? The blunt question hung in the air. Beside her, she felt Sung-ho tense, but he didn't interrupt. This was her test, apparently. Because Jae-min asked me to dance, Sandra said simply, and then he asked me to come back, and I don't break promises to children. Something flickered in Jin-seong's eyes. Not warmth exactly, but maybe respect. You know what we are? What this family does? I know the rumors. I know you're powerful. I know people are scared of you. She lifted her chin. I also know your grandson is the sweetest child I've ever met, and your son is a good man. The rest is complicated probably, but those things are simple. Jin-seong stopped circling, faced her directly. You're either very stupid or very brave. Appa, Sung-ho said warningly, I'm not finished. Jin-seong didn't break eye contact with Sandra. My family has enemies. People who would hurt anyone we care about to get to us. People who have tried before. His voice dropped. My youngest son's wife was killed in what police called a robbery. We know better. That's why Sang-min doesn't date anymore. Why my wife checks under her car every morning. Why I have guards with me everywhere. Sandra felt ice slide down her spine. I didn't know. Because we keep it quiet. Protect what's ours. Jin-seong stepped closer. If you stay, you become ours to protect. But you also become a target. Are you prepared for that? The room was so silent, Sandra could hear her own heartbeat. She thought about walking away, about returning to her normal life, where the biggest danger was running out of coffee before her morning class. Then she thought about Jae-min humming her grandmother's songs, about Sung-ho's rare smiles, about feeling like she'd finally found something real in a world that often felt impossibly lonely. Yes, she said clearly, I'm prepared. Jin-seong studied her for another long moment. Then, shockingly, he smiled. It wasn't warm exactly, but it wasn't hostile either. Good. We'll see how long that lasts. He turned to Sung-ho, switched to Korean. They spoke rapidly for several minutes, while Sandra stood there feeling like she'd just survived a tornado. When they finally switched back to English, Jin-seong's expression had changed to something grimmer. There's a problem with the Nakamura family, he told Sung-ho. They're contesting the shipping routes in San Diego. It's getting messy. How messy? 3 of their men got arrested yesterday. They think we tipped off the feds. Jin-seong's jaw tightened. We didn't, but they don't believe that. I need you in California for a few weeks. Smooth things over. Sandra saw something flash across Sung-ho's face. Frustration, maybe. Or worry. When? Tomorrow. Appa, I can't just... Yes, you can. Jin-seong's voice was final. Sang-min will watch Jae-min. Your mother will help. This needs to be handled before it escalates. Sung-ho's hands clenched into fists, but he nodded. Fine. After Jin-seong left, taking his security detail and the oppressive atmosphere with him, Sung-ho slumped against the kitchen counter. I'm sorry you had to see that. Your father is scary, Sandra said honestly, but he loves you. I could see that. Love in my family looks different than most people's. He reached for her hand, pulled her closer. I don't want to leave, not now, not when we're just... Just what? Just starting to be something, he finished quietly. But I have to go. This business with the Nakamura family could turn violent if it's not handled correctly. Violent? Sandra's voice came out smaller than she wanted. I won't let it get that far. Sung-ho cupped her face with both hands, his touch impossibly gentle. But I need you to promise me something while I'm gone. Stay close to Jae-min. Let my brother protect you both. And if Hee-jin shows up, call me immediately. Why would she? Because she's been asking questions, making noise about getting custody of Jae-min again. His thumbs stroked her cheekbones. She knows about you. She'll try to use that. Sandra wanted to be brave, wanted to say she could handle anything. But the fear must have shown on her face because Sung-ho pulled her into his arms, held her so tightly she could feel his heartbeat. I'm sorry, he whispered into her hair. I'm so sorry for dragging you into this mess. I walked in on my own, Sandra reminded him. Remember? I asked Jae-min to dance. Best decision I never made, Sung-ho said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. He pulled back slightly, looked down at her. Can I? He didn't finish the question, but Sandra understood. She nodded. Sung-ho kissed her forehead. Like a promise, like a goodbye that neither of them wanted to say. When he pulled away, his eyes were dark with something that made her stomach flutter. I'll come back, he said. I promise. You'd better, Sandra replied, trying for light even though her heart was hammering. Someone needs to save that poor tofu from my cooking. He laughed, but it sounded sad. They stayed like that for a long moment, just holding each other in his expensive kitchen, while the world waited outside, complicated and dangerous and vast. Sung-ho left at dawn the next morning. Sandra had spent the night in the guest room at his insistence, waking to find him already dressed for travel. Jae-min still sleeping. My brother will be here in an hour, he told her quietly. Stay with Jae-min today? He'll be upset when he realizes I'm gone. Of course. Sung-ho hesitated, then kissed her forehead again. Be safe. You too. After he left, the house felt emptier than it should have. Sandra made breakfast for Jae-min, who took the news of his father's departure with better grace than expected, though he held her hand a little tighter than usual. Sang-min arrived carrying enough coffee and pastries for a small army. So, he said cheerfully, ready to meet the rest of this circus? Is it worse than your father? Different kind of worse. He grinned. Our mother's hosting her book club this afternoon. She's invited you. Sandra blinked. That sounds like a trap. It absolutely is, Sang-min confirmed, but refusing would be worse. Korean mother logic is non-negotiable. He wasn't wrong. That afternoon, Sandra found herself sitting in Mrs. Kim's living room, surrounded by 5 elegantly dressed Korean women who spoke in rapid Korean while pretending to discuss a book none of them had probably read. Mrs. Kim introduced her as the African girl helping with Jae-min, which was technically true but felt reductive. The other women smiled with varying degrees of warmth, asked polite questions about her studies, her family, her intentions. Then one of them, a sharp-eyed woman named Mrs. Choi, leaned forward. How did you really meet Sung-ho? The room went silent. Sandra had been raised by her grandmother to be honest, so she was. His son was crying at a gala. I asked Jae-min to dance. Sung-ho found us, and then things happened. Things happened, Mrs. Choi repeated, tasting the words. And now you're living in his house? I'm not living. You stayed last night, Mrs. Kim said calmly. Sang-min told me. Of course he did. Sandra felt heat creep up her neck. I stayed in the guest room because Sung-ho was leaving early and wanted someone with Jae-min. Mrs. Kim sipped her tea. And you have feelings for my son? The directness shouldn't have surprised her at this point. Sandra met the older woman's eyes. Yes. Does he have feelings for you? You'd have to ask him that. Another woman laughed. She's smart, this one. Doesn't give away information. Survival instinct, Sandra said dryly. I get the feeling that matters in this family. To her surprise, Mrs. Kim smiled. Actually smiled, wide and genuine. You're learning. Good. The rest of the book club went surprisingly well, actually. The women were intimidating, but not unkind, once they'd apparently decided she wasn't trying to scam their way into Sung-ho's money. They asked about Burundi, shared stories about their own immigration experiences, fed her way too much food. By the time Sandra left, she felt like she'd somehow passed a test she hadn't known she was taking. Sung-ho called that night, his voice tired but warm. How was book club? Terrifying and wonderful. Sandra curled up on her apartment couch, phone pressed to her ear. Your mother asked if I have feelings for you. What did you say? The truth. Silence. Then, quietly, which is? You know what it is, Sandra said. Don't make me say it first. His laugh was low and intimate, even across the distance. I have feelings for you too, strong ones. Ones that probably make no logical sense, given we've known each other less than a month. Feelings rarely make sense. No, they don't, he sighed. Things here are complicated. The Nakamuras are being difficult, but I'm handling it. Be careful. Always. A pause. Jae-min asked about you 6 times today, according to Sang-min. He misses you. Sandra's heart squeezed. I miss him too, and other people. Other people? His voice held laughter again. That's the best you can do? I'm being mysterious. You're terrible at mysterious. They talked for another hour, about nothing and everything. By the time they hung up, Sandra felt settled in a way she hadn't since he'd left. The feeling lasted exactly 12 hours. She was at the university library, working on her dissertation, when her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Is this Dr. Umatoniwase? A woman's voice, professional but urgent. Yes? This is Dr. Reeves from Denver Children's Hospital. I'm calling about Jae-min Kim. He was brought in about an hour ago. Sandra's stomach dropped to the floor. What happened? He had what appears to be a severe panic attack at his grandmother's house. He's stable now, but he's asking for you. Crying, actually, and won't let anyone touch him. Dr. Reeves hesitated. His grandmother said you might be able to help. Sandra was already gathering her things. I'll be there in 15 minutes. She made it in 12, breaking probably several traffic laws. Sang-min met her at the entrance, his usually cheerful face drawn with worry. He just collapsed, Sang-min said, as he led her through the corridors. 1 minute he was fine, playing with his trains, and the next he was hyperventilating and screaming. The doctors can't calm him down. They reached a private room where Sandra could hear Jae-min's cries, even through the closed door. She pushed inside to find the boy curled in the corner of a hospital bed, rocking violently, his hands over his ears. Mrs. Kim stood nearby, tears streaming down her face. He won't let me touch him. He won't let anyone. Sandra moved slowly, sat on the floor next to the bed, started humming that same Burundian lullaby from the gala. Jae-min's rocking slowed. Just a fraction, but enough. Hey, buddy, Sandra said softly. Remember me? I'm here now. You're safe. The boy's hands lowered slightly from his ears. His eyes, red and swollen, found hers. Nice, lady? That's right. Sandra held out her hand. Palm up. Didn't push, didn't grab, just offered. Can I help you? Jae-min launched himself at her with such force they both nearly tumbled to the floor. He buried his face in her neck, sobbing, whole body shaking. Sandra wrapped her arms around him, kept humming, rocked gently. I've got you. You're okay. I've got you. Behind them, she heard Mrs. Kim's quiet sob of relief. It took 20 minutes for Jae-min to calm down completely. When he finally pulled back, his face was splotchy but peaceful. Papa? He's in California, Sandra said gently. But Uncle Sang-min is here, and your grandmother, and me. Don't leave. Her heart broke. I'm not going anywhere. Dr. Reeves examined Jae-min once he'd calmed, declared him physically fine, but emotionally overwhelmed. Sometimes autistic children experience shutdown when their routine is disrupted. His father leaving triggered it. I should have known, Mrs. Kim said, wringing her hands. I should have been more careful. You didn't know, Sandra assured her. None of us did. They kept Jae-min for observation overnight. Sandra stayed, sleeping in an uncomfortable chair next to his bed, waking every time he stirred. Mrs. Kim brought her coffee in the morning, sat down with a heavy sigh. Thank you, the older woman said quietly, for coming, for helping. Of course. You love them, Mrs. Kim said, not a question. My son and grandson. Sandra looked at Jae-min's sleeping face, thought about Sung-ho's voice on the phone last night when she'd called to tell him what happened. The raw fear, the desperate need to be there. The trust he'd placed in her to take care of his son. Yes, she whispered. I do. Mrs. Kim patted her hand. Good. They need someone who loves them without wanting to change them. Her expression hardened. Unlike Hye-jin, as if summoned by the mention of her name, Sung-ho's ex-wife appeared in the doorway. Hye-jin looked immaculate despite the early hour, her expression calculating as it swept over the room. I heard my son was hospitalized. He's not your son anymore, Mrs. Kim said coldly. You gave up that right. I'm still his mother. A mother doesn't abandon her child because he's not perfect. Mrs. Kim stood, physically blocking Hyejin's view of Jaemin. Leave, now! I have legal rights. No, you don't. Sang-min appeared behind Hyejin, and there was nothing charming about his expression now. You signed away custody. It's over. Hyejin's eyes found Sandra, sitting there in yesterday's clothes with Jaemin's hand clutched in hers. Something vicious crossed her face. So it's true. Sung-ho is replacing me with her. He's not replacing you, Sandra said quietly. He's moving forward without you. There's a difference. You have no idea what you're getting into, Hyejin hissed. This family will eat you alive. You're just a novelty, something different and exotic. Once that wears off, that's enough. Mrs. Kim's voice could have frozen lava. Security! 2 guards appeared immediately. Hyejin left with her head high and murder in her eyes, but she left. The room felt cleaner without her in it. She'll try again, Mrs. Kim said wearily. She always does. That night, after Jaemin had been released and was sleeping peacefully at home, Sung-ho called. Sandra told him everything, including Hyejin's visit. I'm coming back, he said immediately. Tomorrow. This can wait. No, Sandra said firmly. Jaemin is fine now. Your business there is important. I can handle things here. You shouldn't have to, but I can, and I want to. She took a breath. Let me help, Sung-ho. Let me be part of this. Silence stretched between them. Then, so softly she almost missed it. I think I'm falling in love with you. Sandra's breath caught. I think I'm already there. Yeah? His voice was rough with emotion. Even knowing everything, how complicated this is. Especially because of that. She smiled, even though he couldn't see it. Nothing worth having is ever simple. No, he agreed. It's not. When they hung up, Sandra sat in her apartment, looking out at Denver's nighttime skyline. Somewhere out there, a dangerous man was handling dangerous business. Somewhere closer, a little boy was dreaming, hopefully peaceful dreams. And here, in her tiny space with her secondhand furniture and her unfinished dissertation, she felt more certain than ever that she was exactly where she was meant to be, even if it terrified her, especially because it did. Sung-ho returned from California 6 days later, looking exhausted and grim. Sandra met him at the house with Jaemin, who flung himself at his father with unusual enthusiasm. Papa, you came back! I promised I would, didn't I? Sung-ho held his son close, but his eyes were on Sandra over Jaemin's head. They held questions, hope, and something darker that made her stomach clench. After Jaemin went to bed, they sat in Sung-ho's study. He poured himself whiskey, which he'd never done before, in front of her. It's handled, he said finally, the Nakamura situation. But it cost us. It cost more than I wanted to pay. Sandra waited. She'd learned that pushing Sung-ho to talk before he was ready never worked. Someone died, he said quietly. Not by my hand, but because of decisions I made. A Nakamura enforcer, who got caught between his bosses and ours. He downed the whiskey in one swallow. He had a family, kids. I'm sorry. Are you? He looked at her then, really looked. I arranged the circumstances that led to his death. I knew what might happen, and I did it anyway, because protecting my family's interests mattered more. Does that scare you? It should have. Maybe part of her was scared. The sensible part that remembered she was just a psychology student who should have been worrying about dissertation committees, not organized crime families. But the bigger part, the part that mattered, just saw a man who carried impossible weight and never complained about it. Yes, she said honestly, but I'm still here. Something in his face cracked open. Why? Because you're a good father. Because you kept your promise to come back. Because you feel guilty about that man's death, even though you probably don't show it to anyone else. She stood, crossed to where he sat, took the empty glass from his hand. Because I told you on the phone that I loved you, and I meant it. Sung-ho pulled her down onto his lap with sudden urgency, buried his face in her neck. I don't deserve you. Probably not, Sandra agreed, threading her fingers through his hair. But you're stuck with me anyway. He pulled back, cupped her face. I need you to understand something. The life I lead, the business my family runs, it's not going to change. I can't change it, even if I wanted to. There will always be danger, always be complications. I know. Do you really? His thumb stroked her cheekbones. Because Hyejin thought she could handle it. She lasted 3 years before the stress broke her. Before she started resenting Jaemin for being another complication in an already complicated life. I'm not Hyejin. No, he agreed softly. You're not. You're brave and stubborn, and you somehow make my son smile more in a day than she did in a year. But I need to know you're sure. Really sure. Because once you're in this family, really in it, there's no easy way out. Sandra thought about her apartment, her dissertation, the normal life she'd planned. Thought about Jaemin humming her grandmother's songs, about Mrs. Kim's grudging acceptance, about the way Sung-ho looked at her like she was something precious. Kiss me, she said. He blinked. What? You heard me, she smiled. Kiss me, properly, then ask me again if I'm sure. Sung-ho's answering smile was slow and devastating. He leaned in, paused with his lips a breath away from hers. Last chance to run. Shut up and kiss me. He did, and it was everything. So? Still sure, Sandra managed, her heart hammering. Very sure. Thank God, he whispered, and kissed her again. They didn't sleep together that night, didn't even come close. Sung-ho was old-fashioned in ways that surprised her, insisting they take things slow despite the very obvious chemistry between them. But they spent hours curled together on his couch, talking and kissing, and just existing in each other's space. It was perfect. For exactly 3 days. Then Sandra's advisor called with news that derailed everything. The university wants your dissertation defense moved up, Dr. Morrison said. There's a grant opportunity, but you need to be finished and graduated by April to qualify. April? That's 2 months away. I know it's fast, but the money is substantial. Full funding for your first 3 years of practice, connections to major hospitals, everything you need to launch your career. Dr. Morrison paused. But you need to focus, Sandra. Really focus. No distractions. Sandra looked at Sung-ho, who was teaching Jaemin Korean while they made breakfast together. No distractions. Right. I'll make it work, she said. Making it work turned out to be nearly impossible. Between her accelerated dissertation schedule, spending time with Jaemin, and trying to maintain some semblance of a relationship with Sung-ho, something had to give. It ended up being sleep. Sung-ho found her passed out over her laptop at 2 a.m. in his study, 3 empty coffee cups surrounding her. He carefully saved her work, closed the laptop, and carried her to his bedroom. Sandra woke to morning light, and Sung-ho watching her from a chair nearby, already dressed for the day. You can't keep doing this, he said quietly. I'm fine. You're exhausted. He moved to sit on the edge of the bed. I'm worried about you. I just need to get through the next 2 months. And then what? His voice was gentle but firm. You kill yourself trying to do everything? Sandra, you're one person. I can handle it. I know you can, he said, but you shouldn't have to. Let me help. Stay here. I'll give you space to work, help with anything you need. You're basically living here anyway. It was true. She'd spent maybe 5 nights at her own apartment in the last month, but moving in felt huge, felt like admitting this was real and permanent and terrifying. What about Jaemin? She asked. Won't it be confusing for him? He already thinks you live here, Sung-ho said dryly. He asked me last week why you sleep in the guest room instead of with Papa like in the movies. Despite herself, Sandra laughed. What did you tell him? That grown-ups are complicated. He took her hand. Move in, officially. I'm not proposing or anything. I know it's too soon for that. But let me take care of you while you finish your degree, please. Sandra thought about it for maybe 30 seconds before nodding. Okay. His smile was bright enough to rival the sun. Yeah? Yeah. But I'm keeping my apartment for a few more months, just in case. He kissed her, cutting off the rest of the sentence. Fair enough? Moving in was surprisingly easy. Sandra didn't own much, and what she did own fit neatly into the guest room that Sung-ho insisted on converting into her personal office. He had his people move her furniture within a day, set up her desk exactly how she liked it, even bought her a ridiculously expensive ergonomic chair. This is too much, she protested. It's an investment in your spine health, he replied. Now sit down and write your dissertation. I'm making dinner. Jae-min adapted to the new arrangement like it was the most natural thing in the world. He started bringing Sandra drawings while she worked, sitting quietly nearby, doing his own schoolwork, occasionally asking questions that somehow always seemed to come at moments when she needed a mental break. It was domestic and wonderful, and everything Sandra hadn't known she wanted. Then Hyejin filed for custody. The papers arrived by courier on a Tuesday morning. Sung-ho read them in silence, his expression going blank in that scary way that meant he was furious. "She can't do this," Sandra said, reading over his shoulder. "She signed away her rights. She's claiming I'm an unfit parent." His voice was ice. "That Jae-min is being exposed to dangerous situations and inappropriate influences." He looked at her. "She's talking about you." Sandra's stomach dropped. "What?" "She's arguing that I'm living with an unmarried woman, that Jae-min is being confused by my relationship with someone who isn't his mother, that you're not qualified to be around him despite your education." Sung-ho's hands clenched around the papers. "She's using our relationship as ammunition. So we stop." "No." His voice cracked like a whip. "We don't stop anything. I'm not letting her manipulate us." "But if it affects Jaemin's custody, it won't." Sung-ho stood, started pacing. "My lawyers are better than hers. She has no legal standing. This is harassment. She's his mother. She walked away," Sung-ho shouted, then immediately looked guilty when Sandra flinched. He took a breath, visibly gathering control. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have yelled. But Sandra, you have to understand. Hyejin doesn't want Jaemin back because she loves him. She wants him back because I'm happy, and she can't stand that." "You think this is about you?" "I think this is about control." He came back to her, took her hands. "She's been calling my business associates, spreading rumors, trying to damage my reputation. When that didn't work, she went after my family through Jae-min." "What do? We fight," Sung-ho said simply, "and we win." The custody battle consumed the next month. Sandra found herself being deposed, answering invasive questions about her relationship with Sung-ho, her qualifications, her intentions. Hyejin's lawyers tried to paint her as a gold digger, an opportunist, someone who'd manipulated her way into the family. Mrs. Kim testified that Sandra had been nothing but positive for Jae-min. Dr. Reeves from the hospital spoke about how only Sandra could calm the boy during his panic attack. Even Mrs. Choi from the book club showed up to give a character reference, but the worst was when they made Jae-min testify. The judge met with him privately, age-appropriate questions in a comfortable room. But Sandra saw him afterwards, saw how small and scared he looked, how he clung to Sung-ho. "They asked if I love Mama," Jae-min whispered to Sandra that night. "I don't remember her. Is that bad?" Sandra's heart shattered. "No, baby. That's not bad. You don't have to love someone who hurt you." "She hurt Papa too," Jae-min said solemnly. "That's why he's sad sometimes, but he's less sad since you came." She hugged him close, fighting tears. "I'm not going anywhere." "Promise?" "Promise." The judge's ruling came 2 weeks later. Hyejin's petition was denied. She was granted supervised visitation once a month if Jae-min agreed, but custody remained fully with Sung-ho. They won. But victory felt hollow when Sandra saw how the stress had affected all of them. Jae-min had started having nightmares. Sung-ho was drinking more than usual, and Sandra had fallen weeks behind on her dissertation. "I need to focus on school," she told Sung-ho the night after the ruling. "I'm going to fail if I don't catch up." "I know." He looked exhausted. "I'm sorry this took so much from you." "It's not your fault." "Isn't it?" He laughed bitterly. "You were right when you said my life is complicated. Maybe too complicated." Fear shot through her. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe you should go back to your apartment for a while. Focus on your work without all this drama." He wouldn't meet her eyes. "Maybe we moved too fast." "Don't," Sandra said sharply. "Don't do that. Don't push me away because you're scared." "I'm not scared." "You're terrified," she interrupted. "You're terrified that loving me will hurt Jae-min, that I'll leave like Hyejin did, that you can't protect both of us. But Sung-ho, I'm not her, and I'm not leaving." "You should," he said quietly. "You should leave before this life destroys you." "Too late." Sandra crossed to him, took his face in her hands. "I already love you, both of you. You can't scare me away." "Sandra," she planted a kiss on his lips and whispered, "I love you and I love your son. I love your complicated, scary, beautiful family. And I'm not going anywhere unless you physically throw me out." Sung-ho's control finally broke. He kissed her back with everything he had, pulled her close like she was the only thing keeping him anchored. "I love you," he whispered. "God help me. I love you so much it terrifies me." "Good," she whispered back. "Be terrified with me?" They stayed like that for a long time, just holding each other. Outside, Denver was waking up to a new day. Inside, they were building something that felt permanent, despite all the chaos trying to tear it apart. Later that week, Sandra defended her dissertation. She passed with highest honors. Dr. Morrison pulled her aside afterwards. "Congratulations, Dr. Umutoniwase. You did it, Dr. Umutoniwase." The title felt surreal. "Thank you," Sandra said, feeling tears prick her eyes. "For everything. What's next for you?" Sandra thought about Sung-ho, about Jae-min, about the life she was building with them. Opening a practice here in Denver, focusing on neurodivergent children from diverse backgrounds. "Sounds perfect." Dr. Morrison smiled. "You're going to be amazing at it." The celebration that night was small but perfect. Just Sung-ho, Jae-min, and Sung-ho's immediate family. Mrs. Kim made enough food to feed an army. Jin Seong gave a gruff speech about hard work and determination that almost sounded like approval. Sang-min got drunk and gave an embarrassing toast about true love. And Jae-min made her a card that said, "Dr. Nice Lady," with careful crayon drawings of all of them holding hands. "I'm framing this," Sandra announced, clutching the card. "As you should," Sung-ho agreed, his arm around her waist. He looked happy, truly happy, for the first time since the custody battle started. That night, after everyone left and Jae-min was sleeping, Sung-ho took Sandra's hand and led her outside to his backyard. The Denver sky was clear and full of stars. "I have something for you," he said, suddenly nervous in a way she'd never seen him. "You already threw me a party. This is different." He pulled out a small box, and Sandra's heart stopped. "Wait, let me explain before you panic. This isn't an engagement ring. Not yet, anyway. But I wanted to give you something that shows how serious I am about us. About our future." He opened the box. Inside was a delicate necklace, a small pendant shaped like two hands intertwined. One hand was clearly Korean in design, the other African. "Jae-min helped design it," Sung-ho said softly. "He said it looks like when you hold hands during dancing." Sandra couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. "I know I'm supposed to do this properly," Sung-ho continued. "Take more time, follow tradition. But I also know that life is short and unpredictable, and I don't want to waste any more time pretending we're not building something permanent here." He took the necklace out, moved to clasp it around her neck. "This is a promise that whatever comes next, we face it together. You, me, and Jae-min. And your terrifying family," Sandra added, laughing through tears. "And my terrifying family," he agreed with a smile. He stepped back to look at her. "So? What do you say?" Sandra touched the pendant, felt the weight of it against her heart. "I say yes. To all of it. To everything." Sung-ho's kiss was soft and sweet and full of promise. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I'm going to marry you someday, Dr. Umutoniwase. Fair warning?" "I'm counting on it, Mr. Kim." They stood there under the stars, holding each other, while the future stretched out before them, full of possibility and promise, and the knowledge that whatever challenges came next, they'd face them together. Because that's what family did. 3 months after her dissertation defense, Sandra's practice was thriving. She'd rented a small office space in Capitol Hill, painted the walls warm colors that put children at ease, filled it with toys and books in multiple languages. Her client list was growing weekly, mostly through word of mouth from parents desperate for someone who understood both neurodivergence and cultural sensitivity. Jae-min was her unofficial assistant on Saturdays, helping younger kids feel comfortable by showing them his favorite quiet activities. He'd grown so much in the months since that first gala, more confident, more communicative, more himself. Life was good, which meant something was about to go wrong. The first sign was Sang-min showing up at her office on a Tuesday afternoon, his usually cheerful face drawn and serious. "We need to talk." Sandra's stomach dropped. "What happened?" "My father got arrested this morning." The words didn't make sense at first. Kim Jin-seong, arrested? The man was careful. Always had layers of protection between himself and anything illegal. "What's the charge?" she managed. "Money laundering, conspiracy, racketeering." Sang-min ran a hand through his hair. "The feds have been building a case for years, apparently. They arrested half the family's business associates today, too. Where's Sung-ho? With the lawyers. He told me to get you somewhere safe. Sang-min's eyes were intense. Sandra, when they start digging into my father's business, they're going to look at everyone connected to him. That includes you now. But I haven't done anything. Doesn't matter. You're living with Sung-ho. You're close to the family. They'll investigate you to see if you can be flipped, used as a witness. He held up his phone, showing news articles already spreading online. This is going to be everywhere by tonight. Your practice, your reputation, everything you've built could get dragged through the mud, just by association. Sandra sat down heavily. She'd known, intellectually, that the Kim family operated in gray areas, but she'd managed to exist in a bubble where that knowledge stayed theoretical, distant. Now it was crashing into her real life with the force of a freight train. What do I do? Talk to Sung-ho. Make sure you're on the same page. Sang-min's expression softened. And Sandra? Whatever you decide, whatever happens next, my brother loves you. Remember that. Sung-ho came home after midnight, looking 10 years older than he had that morning. Sandra was waiting in his study, having already put Jaemin to bed with promises that everything was fine. How bad is it? She asked. Bad. He poured himself whiskey, drank it down. The prosecution has emails, financial records, testimony from people we thought were loyal. They're going after my father with everything they have. And you? I'm implicated in some of the charges. Nothing they can prove, probably, but enough to make things difficult. He finally looked at her. Sandra, I need you to distance yourself from us, publicly, before this gets worse. No! This isn't negotiable. You're right, it's not. She stood, crossed to him. I'm not leaving. Not now. Not like this. You don't understand what's coming, Sung-ho said desperately. Federal investigations are vicious. They'll dig into every part of your life, question everyone you know, try to find something, anything, to use against you. Your practice could be destroyed. Your reputation, your career. Everything. I know. Then why? Because I love you, Sandra said simply. Because Jaemin needs stability, not more people walking away. Because your family took me in and treated me like one of their own, despite everything. She cupped his face. I'm not scared of complicated, remember? Sung-ho's eyes were bright with unshed tears. You're insane. Probably. She kissed him softly. But I'm your brand of insane. He pulled her close, held her so tightly she could barely breathe. I don't deserve you. We've established this already, she murmured against his chest. Now tell me what we need to do. What they needed to do, apparently, was prepare for war. The prosecution's case against Jin Seong was solid. Too solid. Someone inside the organization had been feeding information to federal agents for months, possibly years. The family was scrambling to figure out who, while simultaneously trying to mount a legal defense. Meanwhile, Sandra found herself being followed. Not obviously, but she noticed the same cars, the same faces, federal agents watching to see if she'd lead them somewhere useful or do something incriminating. She didn't. Just went to work, came home, lived her life as normally as possible. But the pressure was constant. Then Hee-jin made her move. She called a press conference, positioned herself as a concerned mother, worried about her son being raised in a criminal household. The footage played on every local news station. Hee-jin in perfect makeup and modest clothing, crying about how she'd made mistakes, but only wanted what was best for Jaemin. She's trying to get custody again, Mrs. Kim said, watching the news with fury in her eyes. Using the investigation as leverage. She's smarter this time, Sang-min added grimly. She's not filing legal papers, just creating public pressure, making us look like monsters so that when she does file, public opinion is on her side. Sandra felt sick. This is my fault. If I hadn't gotten involved, don't! Sung-ho's voice was sharp. Don't give her that power. This is Hee-jin being Hee-jin, using any weapon she can find. But Sandra couldn't shake the guilt. When reporters started showing up at her practice, asking patients' parents invasive questions, 3 families pulled their children out. One mother told her apologetically, I'm sorry, I just can't have my daughter associated with this kind of thing. That night, Sandra sat in her office alone, looking at the empty appointment slots. Building this practice had been her dream. Now it was crumbling around her. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You don't belong in his world. Walk away before you get hurt. Then another, African gold digger. We know what you are. Another, that kid deserves better than some wannabe stepmom playing house. They kept coming, dozens of them, each one more vicious than the last. Sandra's hands shook as she tried to block the numbers, but new ones kept appearing. She didn't tell Sung-ho. He had enough to worry about, but Sang-min figured it out 3 days later when he found her crying in her car outside the Kim house. How long has this been happening? He demanded, reading through the messages. Few days. Sandra wiped her eyes. It's fine, just trolls. It's not fine. Sang-min was already making calls. Within an hour, he'd tracked down the source, some online hate group that Hyejin's PR team had subtly encouraged. I'm going to destroy them. Don't. Sandra caught his arm. That'll just make it worse. Give them more ammunition. So what, you just take it? I survive it, she said tiredly. Like everything else. But surviving was getting harder. Her practice was hemorrhaging clients. The university where she'd hoped to take adjunct teaching positions suddenly had budget concerns. Even her landlord called about concerns from other tenants regarding her presence in the building. She was being systematically isolated from every professional avenue she'd built. The breaking point came when her grandmother called from Burundi, having seen the American news coverage online. What's happening there? She asked in Kirundi, her voice thin with worry. The news says you're involved with dangerous people. It's complicated, Gogo, Sandra replied, using the familiar term for grandmother. But I'm safe. Are you happy? The question cut to the heart of everything. Sandra looked around the Kim house, at the photos of Jae-min on the walls, at Sung-ho's jacket hanging by the door. Thought about family dinners with Mrs. Kim, about Sang-min's terrible jokes, about Jin-seong's gruff but genuine affection. Yes, she said softly, I'm happy. Then that's what matters, her grandmother said firmly. Hold on to that happiness with both hands. Don't let anyone take it from you. After they hung up, Sandra felt steadier. Her grandmother had survived civil war, immigration, building a life from nothing. If she could do that, Sandra could survive a few hateful messages and professional setbacks. She just had to hold on. The trial started in September, 6 months after Jin-seong's arrest. The courtroom was packed with reporters, spectators, federal agents. Sandra sat in the gallery next to Mrs. Kim, watching as prosecutors laid out their case with devastating precision. They had emails showing money moving through shell companies, testimony from former associates who'd taken deals, financial records that painted a clear picture of an organization built on illegal activity. Jin-seong sat calm and composed through it all, giving nothing away. But Sandra saw the strain in Mrs. Kim's face, the way Sung-ho's hands clenched into fists. The prosecution spent a week building their case. Then the defense started dismantling it piece by piece. Yes, there were suspicious financial transactions, but no direct proof of illegal activity. Yes, some associates had criminal connections, but that didn't make the entire business criminal. The testimony was from people with grudges, or who'd taken deals to save themselves, not reliable witnesses. It was brilliant and brutal and exhausting to watch. During a recess in the second week, Sandra stepped outside for air and found Hyejin waiting. She looked different than at the gala. Harder somehow. Desperate. He's going to leave you, Hyejin said without preamble. When this gets too hard, when you become more liability than asset, he'll cut you loose. That's what the Kims do. Is that what happened to you? Sandra asked quietly. He cut you loose? I left before he could, Hyejin snapped, when I realized this family was poisonous. Then why do you keep trying to get back in? The question clearly hit a nerve. Hyejin's perfect composure cracked, just for a moment. Because I made a mistake, because I was scared and I ran, and now I can't get back what I lost. But you still can. You can still get out before... Before what? Sandra interrupted. Before I fall more in love? Too late, before things get hard? Also too late. Before I become part of this family? Way too late, Hyejin. You're a fool. Maybe, Sandra agreed, but I'm a fool who's staying. Hyejin stared at her for a long moment, something almost like respect flickering in her eyes. Then she walked away without another word. That night, alone with Sung-ho, after another grueling day of testimony, Sandra made a decision. I want to testify. Sung-ho looked up from the legal documents he'd been reviewing. What? For your father's character. I want to tell the jury about the man I know, not the one the prosecution is painting. She held up a hand when he started to protest. I know it's risky. I know it'll make me more of a target, but your father supported us when everyone else was questioning our relationship. He let me into this family. I owe him this. You don't owe us anything. I owe you everything, Sandra corrected. You gave me a family when I felt alone in this country. Let me help. After a long moment, Sung-ho nodded. Okay, I'll tell the lawyers. Sandra testified 3 days later. The prosecution tried to rattle her, implied she was biased, suggested she was only defending Jin Seong to protect her relationship with his son. But she stayed calm, told the truth about a man who'd been stern but fair, who'd worried about her safety, who'd welcomed her despite his own reservations. Mr. Kim could have made my life impossible, Sandra said clearly. He could have turned his family against me, could have pushed me out. Instead, he protected me. He made sure I was safe when threats came. Whatever else he might have done in business, the man I know is honorable where it counts. The jury listened. More importantly, Sung-ho listened, his eyes bright with emotion. The verdict came down 3 weeks later. Guilty on money laundering charges, not guilty on the racketeering and conspiracy counts. Jin Seong was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison, eligible for parole in 3. It wasn't a complete victory, but it wasn't total defeat either. The family business would survive. Sung-ho would take over operations. They would endure. The night after the sentencing, Jin Seong called from lockup. Sandra happened to answer Sung-ho's phone, and there was a moment of surprised silence before the older man spoke. Thank you, Jin Seong said gruffly, for testifying, for staying. Family stays, Sandra replied simply. Yes, he agreed. Family stays. Sandra, I need you to do something for me. Anything. Take care of my son and my grandson. They're going to need you more than ever now. A pause. And when I get out, I'm throwing you both the biggest wedding Denver has ever seen. That's not a request. Sandra laughed through tears. Yes, sir. After they hung up, Sung-ho pulled her into his arms. Did my father just demand we get married? Strongly suggest, Sandra corrected. There's a difference. Is there, though? He pulled back to look at her. Because for the record, I'm entirely on board with his suggestion. Whenever you're ready. Ask me properly and find out, Sandra challenged. Sung-ho's smile was bright enough to light the whole house. He dropped to one knee, right there in his living room. No ring, no fancy speech. Just him and her, and the truth between them. Dr. Sandra Umutoniwase, will you marry me? Will you officially join this messy, complicated, occasionally criminal family, and let us love you for the rest of your life? Yes, Sandra said without hesitation. Absolutely yes. He kissed her, picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing. Jae-min appeared in his pajamas, drawn by the noise. Are you married now? Not yet, Sung-ho said, but soon. Good, Jae-min said seriously. Nice lady should definitely stay forever. 3 months later, they had a small courthouse wedding, followed by a massive reception that Jin Seong somehow organized from federal prison. Traditional Korean ceremonies mixed with Burundian customs in ways that shouldn't have worked, but somehow did. Mrs. Kim cried through the entire thing. Sang-min gave another embarrassing speech. Jae-min was the ring bearer and took his job so seriously he stopped halfway down the aisle to make sure the rings were still properly tied to the pillow. And Sandra, wearing a dress that combined Korean hanbok elements with Burundian kaitenge fabric, felt more herself than she ever had. When Sung-ho kissed her at the altar, gentle and reverent, the applause was deafening. Later, at the reception, Mrs. Choi from book club cornered Sandra. You know, when you first showed up, we all bet on how long you'd last. I lost money on you. Should I apologize? Sandra asked, laughing. Absolutely not. I'm glad to be wrong. Mrs. Choi squeezed her hand. Welcome to the family, daughter. Daughter. The word settled warm in Sandra's chest. That night, after the celebration, after Jae-min was tucked into bed, Sung-ho and Sandra stood on their balcony looking out at Denver's lights. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, kissed her neck softly. Any regrets? He murmured. Sandra thought about that first night at the gala, how she'd just wanted to help a crying child, how that one moment of compassion had somehow led to this. A home, a family, a life richer and more complicated than anything she'd imagined. Not even one, she said. Good. Sung-ho turned her in his arms, touched the necklace she still wore, the one with intertwined hands. Because you're stuck with us now, Mrs. Kim. Dr. Kim, Sandra corrected with a smile. I'm keeping my title. Dr. Kim, he agreed, kissing her forehead. I love you. I love you too. Both of you. All of you. She looked up at the stars, the same ones her grandmother could see from Burundi, the same ones that watched over Jin Seong in his cell, the same ones that would shine on whatever challenges came next. Forever. Forever, Sung-ho echoed. And in the quiet of that Denver night, with the man she loved holding her close and their son sleeping safely nearby, Sandra knew she'd found exactly where she belonged. Not in spite of the complications and dangers, but because of the love that held them all together through everything. Because that's what family did. They stayed. They fought. They survived. They loved. And they never, ever gave up on each other. So there you have it. If you enjoyed following Sandra's journey from that first dance with little Jaemin all the way to her wedding day, drop a like, subscribe to this channel, and maybe share this with someone who loves a good cross-cultural love story. Got your own thoughts on how things should have gone differently? Drop them in the comments below because I love hearing from you guys.